Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host, Omar Khalid. But today is the 26th of September 2023, and these are the stories that we'll try to decipher during the course of the show. We'll begin, ladies and gentlemen, with the anti-Muslim hate speech that has been going on in India since quite some time, but it has gained momentum just before the elections that are going to be held in India in 2024. Now, anti-Muslim hate speech incidents have averaged more than one day in the first half of 2023. And were seen most in states with upcoming elections, as per a report by Hindutva Watch, which is a Washington-based group monitoring attacks on minorities. Now, there have been 255 documented incidents of hate speech gatherings targeting Muslims in the first half of this very year. This has been stated in this very report, and we are going to highlight this in our first segment. Our second story of the day, ladies and gentlemen, concerns the fact that climate change is imposing a huge predicament as far as Pakistan or other countries are concerned. Now, rich and developing nations alike need to sharply improve their net zero targets. This has been said in a very important report. A clean energy surge has been the main reason that the world's climate goals are still within reach. Wealthy countries are also and must also reach carbon neutrality around 2045, which seems probable, but only if there is a certain momentum by all the developed countries as well as the developing countries. This is going to be our second story. Our third story concerns 3 terrorists that have been killed in an intelligence-based operation. This has been stated by the ISPR. Security forces killed 3 terrorists during this operation in the general area Tira of Khyber district. We have been seeing a lot of such incidents in the past, especially centered around Khyber Pakhtunkhwa or Balochistan, and we will be talking about this as part of our third story. Our final story, ladies and gentlemen, concerns the looming shutdown in the United States of America. Not the first time we've had such threats. We've heard of such threats in the past that have been, that have loomed around the US, and then of course there has been always a solution that has been found out. Now US President Joe Biden, one of his top aides, have warned that a federal government shutdown could cause widespread suffering, including a rapid loss of food benefits for nearly 7 million low-income women and children. These are threats that emanate in the US, but of course there's always a solution that crops up at the last moment, and these threats are averted. But we need to highlight it as to the threat that is now currently emanating in the US as far as the shutdown is concerned. This is going to be our last story. Let's begin with our first, and that concerns the anti-Muslim hate speech in India that has been concentrated around the elections. We all know the elections are going to happen in the year 2024 in India, and this is going to be an important year, and we see a lot of maneuvering just before these elections, whether it be using the Pakistan card, whether it be using pressure tactics against the minorities in India, or whether it be using other means or all means possible, let's put it that way, to strengthen the position of the BJP and the Hindu-led or Hindutva-led party and its followers within India. This is something that we have been seeing for quite some time, and this has only aggravated or accentuated in the last few weeks. To discuss that and more, we've been joined by Farwa. She's a researcher with the CPSC at the ISSI, which is a leading think tank in Islamabad. Thank you very much, Farwa, to have joined us. Farwa, let's begin with the anti-Muslim hate speech. We've had it, we've seen it, we've heard it many a times. There has been a lot of how should I say, words or documented facts as far as this anti-hate speech is concerned. Important countries in the West, including the United States, have highlighted that during different important visits or by the State Department spokesperson, but nothing happens as far as India or a change in its attitude is concerned. Is India so unafraid of any reaction?
Thank you so much for having me on the show. Your question's very pertinent, and this is the question the international community with the consciousness some sort of to address this question, whether they want India to go unwarranted on that front, but it is taking the lead on anti-Muslim hate and anti-Muslim violence crime that has not been recorded ever in Indian history. So the point that has been raised and the question that has been raised that whether international community is going to pressure India ever, are you going to correct your course? But the course is correct because it is based on radicalization of Indian society.
This is the course that they've always wanted to follow.
That's true. They follow the rule and they follow the course, and this started from the very beginning of the time when Prime Minister, the current Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, he was the Chief Minister of Gujarat, and started from there. And the roots are still, you know, when the roots are there, the seed is planted, and it is still bearing that fruits. But whether the India, the modern, the so-called rising and shining India, democratic, and what you say, the charming India that is inviting the attention of international community of all sections.
They really know how to play with the soft image, don't they?
Yeah, they're playing with the soft image. And now the interesting, I think the joke should goes on, because they are projecting themselves. BJP under Narendra Modi's watch is projecting itself as a spiritual democracy. And in G20...
How can you call yourself a spiritual democracy? I fail to understand, with all that has been going on in India, how can a country have the gall to call itself a spiritual democracy?
That's the point, and that's the problem. This is their ideology, because their ideology at their national level is not inclusive. This is exclusive, this is separatist, and this is based on something where you can cut your societies into so many factions that you yourself don't know what is going to happen in the coming future.
But you know, you talk of exclusiveness and the fact that instead of being inclusive, it's being exclusive. The fact also remains that despite the different warnings that have been given by the international think tanks such as Genocide Watch, for example, the head of which has said that genocide is, India is on the brink of a widespread genocide. But nobody bats an eyelid despite all these reports. The United Nations Human Rights Council has taken many a report in the past as well. So has Human Rights Watch, so have other important organizations. But you know, no action is taken. Is India really waiting for the time that it implodes, that the genocide really engulfs it?
That's a question that's not only the Pakistanis today, but all over the international community. People are asking what is going on and whether it's going to stop. That is the point. You know, India is playing, it's gambling a big game. It's playing with the weaknesses of the Western powers. It's playing with the weaknesses of other rising countries as well.
But you know, I don't feel that it's playing with the weakness. I think it's using the West, because the West is also using India as a tool as far as its policy in the region is concerned.
Let me take to the recent G20 summit that held in India under India's Indian presidency, because India was the chair of G20 summit for year 2022-2023. What happened? It said that it projects itself, it is the ally and a trusted partner of United States and in Quad and other alliances to counter China's influence. And at the same time, it's also a part of Chinese and Russian partnerships, you know, in SEO, in BRICS. But when G20 summit happened, that was widely considered as India's diplomatic success. It is related to the question that you just asked. India not only played with the weaknesses of United States, it also played with the weakness of China and Russia led bloc as well. Because to US led bloc, US led G7 economies, it offered another economic corridor. India, Middle East, the West corridor, and at the same time it offered the compromise. And the Russian side, you know, the disagreement was made on the use of language in the Indonesia, Bali last time. So it did broker the consensus, but what it did, it made itself a self-purported leader of Global South, telling the West that you cannot corner China and Russia where you want to and set the norms that you want to, but at the same time telling the Chinese and Russian side that we have another thing to use itself as a bargaining chip in this big geopolitical gamble. That
but you know, you talk of big geopolitical gambles. I totally agree with you on the fact that it is half baked. It's not even completely baked, because the fact is it will start to rot in some time because of these very things that India is embroiled in, like the anti-hate, the hate speech, like the pressure tactics that it is using on the different minorities, like the way it is using and abusing the minorities as far as its maneuvering or its different perspectives is concerned. The way it also highlights that India is no longer, I mean, for the Indians, India is no longer an Indian state, it's a Hindu country. This is what they are now projecting, and for them the minorities are like a speck of dust. The most important populace of India is the Hindu populace. With such a mindset, how long or how far can India go? The whole maneuvering, this anti-Muslim hate speech that is going on in India also is more or less a part of it.
For that, the conscience of international community has to reach to a point where it can understand that the kind of radicalization and saffronization it is taking place in India, it's going to take a toll on their societies as well.
But don't they realize that you talk of saffronization, doesn't India realize that saffronization at the end of the day is going to affect it the most?
How it is affecting it the most, but it will be in longer run. But for in the shorter run, it's for the BJP. It's gaining its political success.
But the elections are next year. Do you feel that it can continue in the same momentum of the hate speech, of all that is doing to the minorities, and still garner the votes in the elections? Do you feel they can get away with quote unquote murder?
Yeah, you're so right, and maybe you cannot get away with that. But we have seen what happened with the BBC documentary that was
true.
That was a case that
the whole campaign that they began on a documentary that was based on the truth.
That was based on truth, and other documentaries like that. The facts, the kind of suffocation, the way the freedom voices have been suffocated in India, you just can't expect what is going on. What I have seen over here and what I observe as a neutral analyst is that not only India is playing with the weaknesses of major powers, but the major powers, because they are so caught up in their idea and constructs of all real politique, so they are playing with the weaknesses of India as well. Kashmir and how India is playing with the resolutions of United Nations.
Kashmir is the highlight, but the hallmark of all that India is perpetrating. But let's look at all the other. Let's look at Manipur. Let's look at all the other places where India is creating havoc, and not just with the Muslims, but also with the Christians, also with the Sikhs. Look at what happened in Canada. I mean, they are if you start opening the Pandora's box, you will find things that that can go on and on for years, of all that India has perpetrated and continues to perpetrate as we speak.
I think that is the point where international community needs to wake up. They need to wake up and just...
I think the international community has woken up, but it's just that it's using and staying mum till such time that it needs India for whatever purposes it needs. And the day India is no longer needed is the day that all the Pandora box as far as India's the tactics are concerned will be opened and will be shown to the entire world.
Well, that's the point where we need to be pragmatic. Why the Western communities or the major powers that we're talking about here, why they won't need India? India would be needed. It would be sitting at the table where the negotiations of international and global conflicts would be taking place. But can we just sitting here or maybe anywhere in the world expect that by India's that ugly part of the society, just like you said that what happened in Karnataka, what happened in Madhya Pradesh, what happened in other cities, New Delhi itself, and it's everywhere in India, Manipur violence. It has been recorded by all the experts that are working on human rights, what is happening in India. So the Hindu Watch, the Washington-based think tank. But that is the problem that we have. By we, I mean international community, it has politicized everything. When the humanitarian issue is politicized, there comes a problem. There needs to, I think...
Humanitarian issue should never be politicized. It should be treated as a humanitarian issue.
Should be treated as a, and here I need to relate the very idea. What is the problem? Why why BJP-led India, now Bharat, is becoming a Hindu nationalist nation? Why they want to connect with their Sanskrit roots? What's hidden over there? Okay, we understand the spirituality and how they're linking it with the international and other multilateral forums. We have seen that under the Indian presidency in G20 summit and in SCO's presidency as well, India has used its spiritual places, Kashi, and other cities as well, to project itself spiritual democracy. But at the same time, what it is trying to project the world, that we are very exclusive. And let me take you to Madhya Pradesh. Madhya Pradesh is a place where now anti-Muslim hate crime, they are on rampant. But that is a question I want to ask myself and my audience.
Gujarat is also another place where these activities are rampant, and Gujarat, of course, how can we forget what happened in 2002 and for the reason for which the Modi is called the butcher of Gujarat.
That's the point. That's the past. That's the past that Modi is trying to connect with. It's connecting with the past that is not so beautiful. And I was talking about Madhya Pradesh. India now is trying to connect with its ancient roots. In Madhya Pradesh, where now the anti-Muslim hate crimes are taking place, it is the place where the first memorial of Sati has been established. And it was the place. Can India take pride by being so exclusive and by being so ultra-nationalist, and at the same time take pride in restoring those ugly facts of its own history? And now I would like to connect to another factor here. It's the ideology. When ideology is corrupted, you just can't expect from a nation, from an individual, from a tribe to do something which is good for the humanity. I want to take you to Karnataka. The culture of Devdasi, it is based on ideology. Devdasi is the culture which is based on serving the god, but at the same time they are the temple dancers, and they've been exploited and abused by the society. And in Rajasthan, where also the elections are approaching, and this is all the place where anti-Muslim hate and violence is on a rise. The problem is the ideology. You know, there are so many villages in Rajasthan where prostitution is being inherited from generation to generation, not because it is an economic issue, because it's a tradition. And tell me, which is the country where it is passed on to the other generation, which is based on it is hereditary. So the problem is, and then there is another problem, Dalits. You know, I was reading an article and the news by Rahul Gandhi that he shares on its social media handles. He pointed out this fact that the parliamentary cabinet, it has only too few people who belong to the lower caste. What is happening to India is the ideology. And one day, because its ideology is very much exclusive, it's very much separatist, it's not only the issue of Muslims, it's their main ideology, and that's the problem.
But you know, you talked about, in the beginning of this conversation, you talked about corruption of ideology. I don't think it's a corruption of ideology that they are hampering towards or leaning towards. I think it's an accentuation of the ideology that in their minds they stand for, or what India or Bharat stands for. It's not a corruption, it's an accentuation of their point of view as to what their ideology of Hindu or Hinduma or Hindutva is based ideology is concerned. I think it all stems from the RSS based Hindutva ideology that, you know, the Hindus are the only ones that need to exist and the other minorities are more or less non-existent, should not be catered to, should not be tackled the way it should. But in a world where human rights become paramount, especially when it comes to the West, there is a huge conversation that has begun about religious tolerance and minority rights in the country. Will it lead anywhere?
First, let me take to the mind of a Hindu nationalist. What a Hindu nationalist politician could be thinking, that I am better, that I am a super being. That's a concept. That's where that's the fodder of a populist mindset, that there is a race, there is a creed, that there is a class which is superior to some other class. A certain class of a society, a certain segment of society is a lesser child of God. And that's what's happening in India. That's what's happening in the mind of an extremist politician of India, whether it belongs to BJP, whether it's RSS, whether it is Bajrang Dal. So the point you just raised, that whether it will continue or whether it is going to have a stop. And the kind of question, I mean, it's not a question, it's a fix, it's a dilemma.
It's a narrative that is being built.
It's a narrative. And let me be very honest here. How we can say that West has truly guarded the human rights? But we have seen after 9/11, in the wake of war on terror, the US-led war on terror.
There's an increase in Islamophobia.
Increasing Islamophobia, human rights were violated like they were never had been before. And you know, I was reading an article and it says that United States is not going to compensate the prisoners in Guantanamo Bay because they were treated in a way that does not fit well in human rights charter.
That is true. You remember all the videos and the pictures that came out on social media a couple of years back as to the way they were treated.
And in that context, how we can expect from the West that violated the rights, the human rights itself.
So basically what you're trying to say is that India says, you know, how can you say something, how can you point a finger at me when 4 fingers are pointing towards you as far as the human rights abuses are concerned?
That's the problem, and that exactly where the solution is. And the solution is Pakistan being a victim of Indian aggression on so many fronts and at so many times. And also being a Muslim state, it has also suffered from Islamophobia as well, where our people, our nationals have faced to other countries in Europe and in West. And what is happening in India, no Pakistani can think of going to India and coming back by not. I mean, it has become a nightmare. You just can't think of going there.
But so a lot of tourists still want to go there, and despite the row between Canada and India, a lot of tourists still wanted to go to India, and it is India that has stopped the visas as far as Canadians are concerned. I just wanted to highlight this. But the fact remains, last question, I want a short answer, you know, the whole political angle to it all, that the anti-Muslim hate narrative is being propagated in those areas where the elections are due. This year and next year. You talked of Maharashtra, you talked of Karnataka, you talked of Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Gujarat, which have of course the highest number of such hate speech gatherings. Maharashtra is accounting for 29% of such hate incidents. 80% of these events are being held in areas that are being governed by Narendra Modi's BJP, which is again, as per the reports, widely thought to be winning the 2024 elections. What of India then after 2024? What if BJP garners power in 2024? What happens to the Muslims? What happens to the Sikhs? What happens to the Dalits? What happens to all the other minorities that are present there? Should they just, you know, dig their own graves?
And I think the onus is on India to prove itself as a credible, democratic, responsible stakeholder, not only in the eyes of its nationals, but also in the eyes of international community, and that will be the true test of India itself.
But that will never happen, to be very frank. If it can get away with whatever it is getting away right now, I think in the future also the West is going to just turn a blind eye or a deaf ear to whatever is happening, and they will just, you know, for their own purposes, geopolitical or geostrategic or whatever they feel helps them or aids them to garner their presence in the region. India will continue to do what it is. I think the onus of responsibility now stands on countries such as China, such as the Central Asian countries, such as Pakistan, such as other countries in the region that need to get together and as one and, you know, push pressure on India as to stop its tactics as far as its minorities are concerned.
There are factions, there are progressive factions in India as well that are criticizing India's this extremist and nationalist outlook. For example, you must have seen Congress leader Shashi Tharoor, that why we are doing so much emphasis on these kind of ultra-nationalist texts. For example, he was very much against changing the name India to Bharat, though he was anti-colonial himself. But the point was that India, the name India, has its own selling value.
And so there is a whole opposition, all the opposition parties that have now joined hands against BJP are called India for that very matter. Thank you so very much, Farwa, researcher with this CPSC at the ISSI. Leading think tank in Islamabad, to have joined us, to have talked to us about India. It's interesting that we talk about India, but the fact remains that whatever discussions we might have, I hope they don't go to deaf ears and to without any action whatsoever, because the whole building of this narrative is for the people who can make a change to think of it and to do the needful before it's way too late. Thank you so very much, Omar, for having joined us. Let's come to our second segment, ladies and gentlemen. Our second story today concerns climate change. Now, there has been a report by the IEA that says that the rich and developing nations must sharply improve their net zero targets. It also says that a clean energy surge was the main reason that the world's climate goals are still within reach. Wealthy countries must now reach carbon neutrality by around 2045, 5 years earlier. China, it says, also should speed up a decade to 2050 to keep up to the Paris goal of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. The report says that the world has already delayed too long to avoid hard choices. Record growth in clean energy technology, including solar panels and electric vehicles, means it is still possible to limit the global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. The world, as far as the report is concerned, needs to invest nearly $4.5 trillion per year in the transition to cleaner energy from the start of the next decade, up from the spending of 1.8 trillion expected in the year 2023. We've been joined in the studios to talk about that. This is a topic that is very dear to a lot of us, including myself, climate change. We've been joined by Maryam, Shabbir in the studios. Maryam, thank you very much to have joined us, and welcome back to Newsroom after a huge hiatus. Hope you're doing well. Maryam, climate change, you've been to the States. What is the basic atmosphere like that over there? What do they want to do as far as tackling climate change is concerned? We see of so many pledges at COPs, at Geneva, but they are never translated into action. What is the basic psychology as far as important countries such as the US are concerned?
I'm in the state where I'm living. It's in Northeast, and frankly speaking, they are taking actions, to kind of over there, the state is a bit sensitized to move towards, renewables, but they have plans in place, but nothing implementation yet. But they are thinking to shift towards, other sources of energy. But as far as they're concerned, when it comes to developing countries, of course, the policy is entirely different, because it's not easy to take money out of your banks and present to to developing countries.
But if it's for an important cause, shouldn't the money come out of the bank?
I mean, morally speaking, they should, because under Paris Agreement, they discuss, to give developing countries the $100 billion. And I think that was the time, and now look at the inflation, it should be more than $100 billion. But I'm a bit hopeful for COP28, because there the loss and damage facility they would announce that what they have come up with, because they have formed committees after COP27 to set up formal setup for loss and damage facility. Under that, they would be giving developing countries the money.
Forget the loss and damage facility, which needs a lot of money. Just the transition to cleaner energy, as far as the report is concerned, needs $4.5 trillion investment of that per year. Is the world ready? Is the global north, the west, ready to invest that kind of money, or is it going to shirk it away through pledges and no action?
I mean, it varies from countries to country. Frankly speaking, if I look at the energy outlook and the initiatives taken by the German government in Pakistan, they are working on that, and there are like projects on which they're working with the Ministry of Climate Change Pakistan. And I remember that with my previous organization, STPI, we had those discussions with them on those platforms, and that is in place. As far as that much amount of money is concerned, I mean, I don't see it happening. Because it's very, very difficult, to take money out of developed world. And I don't think so they are going to translate these promises into action, and I don't think so.
What is the alternative, Maryam? What should the developing countries do? What should the countries that are very sensitive to the effects of climate change do then, if the money trickling in is a problem?
I mean, the one way I just told you is loss and damage facility. We are going towards the developing world is pushing them, you know, hard to kind of have formal setup, because once we will have loss and damage facility, this is like kind of one example related to money. If that setup is there, then we can make them accountable that you have promised this and you're not giving us this. You know, there would be like legally binding to them. As far as the clean energy investments are concerned, that is also under Paris Agreement, and they were supposed to, you know, transfer clean energy technologies to the developing countries. But that is also not happening, and I don't think so that will happen. I don't think so we should have false, you know, hopes.
Expectations.
I don't see that happening, and I don't think so that, you know, in this decade we can limit temperature to 1.5 degrees as this report says, because in the last decade the temperature was the highest recorded, deforestation rate, carbon emissions, you know, those are at the peak. And I don't think so within an year or two there are like drastic changes, you know.
So we are going to expect tornadoes, gulfs, and earthquakes and floods and so on and so forth in the next year.
World is already seeing that this year. You know, you see states with forest fires, with flooding. Even in the state where I'm living in Montpellier, there was flooding this year, which is very rare phenomenon over there. There was like increased temperature in different parts of the world, flooding in a lot of parts of the world.
Even just talking of the US where you are living currently, looking at the events that happen there that are linked directly to climate change, doesn't the US government realize that they need to do something to, if not anything else, to help their own country?
Yeah, I mean, in different states that thinking is there. But again, the fossil fuel lobby is really strong over there as well, and it's really hard to shift from there. But as I said, you know, in different states where their legislature and their parliamentarians are, you know, sensitized towards these issues, they are taking actions. But there is, at the same time, in their, you know, their colleagues have strong opposition because of agreeing with coal lobby and stuff, and they also agree that, you know, they should move, they should keep as a superpower, and they should keep using coal, you know, whatever they have.
So what happens to carbon neutrality, a pledge that has been made to, you know, achieve carbon neutrality by 2045? Do you expect that to happen?
I mean, on papers it looks nice, and one should hope that it should be happening. But frankly speaking, the kind of attitude we have been experiencing from them, I don't think so that is happening anytime soon. You see, India by 2060, they said that by 2060 they will reach to carbon neutrality. That means we have a lot of years for them to use fossil fuels. Look at China; they have like a lot of years for the carbon neutrality, and they are falling under, you know, that we are developing countries. In a way, they learn from developed world like US, Germany.
And even the US is using fossil fuel. You yourself talked about the lobbies that you know, push for it to happen.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. And
how can the world, in your point of view, Maryam, you know, change its point of view as far as its own future is concerned? Is it too narrow-minded in your point of view and its objective to realize the long-term goals that it needs to you know, cater towards instead of short-term goals?
I mean, the realization, frankly speaking, is there even among fossil fuel lobbies, but they are business-minded people, so they won't say it. But as far as the rest of the world is concerned, we should keep pushing them. We should keep pressurizing them, the fossil fuel lobbies, and of course developed world and even developing countries who are using, you know, fossil fuels to, you know.
Speaking of fossil fuel lobbies, do you feel that we can somehow convince the fossil fuel lobbies to have some kind of a parallel investment policy?
That is really interesting question. I think you should ask this from person running, you know,
from the
fossil fuel industry. But looking at their business models, I don't think so they would be interested. What now they are doing is, you know, the industries like Coca-Cola and such companies, you know, they are now being part of climate change conversation, and they are, you know, one of the sponsors at climate change events.
I heard Tim Cook, the Apple head, who was saying that now even in their material that they are using, they are trying for carbon neutrality by the year 2030. So these are good initiatives, but these are small organizations compared to the huge, you know, fossil fuel lobbies that exist around the world and in the United States.
That's right. That is there, and I think every fossil fuel, every industry should set their carbon neutrality targets. ideally, but one can hope and one can pressurize them to to really achieve those. Otherwise, I don't think so. We can limit 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature. Right.
As per the report, the countries need to work together to speed up climate action. Which other countries do you feel are really gung-ho or really wanting to go all out as far as combating climate change is concerned? Pakistan is one, but Pakistan, emits the least carbon of all the countries of the world. What about those who are really carbon emitters? Do you feel there is that that drive to do something about it?
I think there are countries who are improving gradually, and one of the examples is of course Germany. They are moving really faster towards renewable energy sources, and they are moving away from fossil fuel sources. And the other is EU countries. They are also trying to achieve their targets towards carbon neutrality. That is also there. Some of the other countries like US is also trying, but the kind of speed which is required is not there, of course, with a lot of developed worlds, and I think that is something which they should really push to achieve those targets. I mean, they are slowly moving towards those. That is there. I mean, their realization is there. They are trying, but they are not trying enough. And I believe they don't want to. They have resources. They have alternate business models. They have alternate ideas. But I think to materialize those ideas, they will take a lot of years. It's now with great speed, and I think the climate change is really changing faster than their actions.
What happens to the clean and green energy sources like solar energy, solar power capacities, electric vehicles that are being used in a lot of countries, including Pakistan? It's beginning in Pakistan, but it has not achieved the level that I've seen in the European Union, for example, or even in the United States of America. Do you feel that trend will catch on?
Frankly speaking, if we are talking about Pakistan, we had like really ambitious targets by 2030 we will have 30% electric cars in Pakistan, but that setup is not here, the infrastructure is not here, the kind of economy and the business models we have, it's not really supportive, and there is like difference between different ministries. So that needs to be sorted out, and of course there are a lot of other challenges too related to implementation of these targets. And by they also set like the target of 60% renewables. But Pakistan, as you said, is developing countries, and we can gradually move towards that.
And Pakistan is not, emitting as much carbon as much as so many other countries are doing.
That's right. But the good thing with the other countries, and what I have observed in the States, is that they do inspection of vehicles, be it personal car or public transportation, on yearly basis, and they do not give fitness certificates to those emitting low fuel, which runs the bad engines. They just don't qualify on the road.
What about the industries? What about the industries there?
That is really tough question to go over there. I mean, to some extent they are following, but what I have seen is that there is kind of climate injustice when it comes to the location of their industries to the other nationalities, especially people with brown people or BIPOC people, we say. Those industries are at the heart of where they are living. And they are,
so they are being affected the most by it.
Of course. Everywhere, be it, developing countries versus developed world, or developed world within other, kind of ethnicities, in that, the one which is most vulnerable is the poor, not the rich of any country. Has it always been the case, whether it be in developing countries or developed states?
I'd like to ask you another perspective as far as, climate change and carbon emission is concerned. The IEA executive director says, and I quote, "Governments need to separate climate from geopolitics, given the scale of the challenge at hand." You see a lot of geopolitics or geostrategic developments at hand in different regions across the world. There are conflicts that are gaining pace with every passing day. Can governments that can make a change separate climate from geopolitics?
I don't think so. In my point of view, I mean, it's one can hope and one should really wish that they should happen, but climate change is connected with politics and everything. It's been this year, it would be 28th COP. Why we haven't received funds so far? Because of politics, because of geopolitics, because of lack of
priorities
ties.
that are different for all the countries.
They have money. It's not like that the developed world doesn't have money.
They have to set their priorities right, and
of
maybe
course.
they don't want, because for them their priorities are different than climate change.
I mean, they do have money to fund wars in different parts of the world, but they don't have money to give us for, you know, under Paris Agreement, for clean technology transfer, for you know, other promises they have made. I mean, you're right in a way that it's all about priorities, and also if they start doing that, developing country would do better, and they don't want their developing countries to, you know, completely independent than their, you know, governments and their countries. So in a way they want us to, you know, kind of suffer, I would say. I mean, I'm saying this because I'm really hopeless, because after all these years they're not materializing their promises, and I think it's the matter of trust with them, you know.
And how can you materialize those promises? When you look at, you know, what the report says, it says what is required is a tripling of global renewable energy, doubling of energy efficient infrastructure, increase in heat pump sales, further rise in EV use by 2030. I mean, it looks so easy on paper, but so difficult to achieve.
It is of course, because it entirely depends on, like one of the examples which I quoted is that, you know, differences between ministries of any country, you know, it's just not Pakistan. One ministry, let's suppose, sets climate change ministry sets targets for environment friendly technology and stuff, but the other, on the other hand, for example, planning ministry or other ministry, they would do developmental projects, they would completely ignore EIA and other related, you know, processes. That would be only on paper, nothing in reality. So that happens. I mean, those differences are there, and I think the only way is, of course, to find legalized ways to, you know, make them accountable. And
how can you you know, take out legalized manners to make them accountable when the organizations that can make them accountable are also, you know, under their grasp and hold?
I mean, we can work on diplomatic fronts. That is a wonderful way to make change, to change their minds towards your country, towards your investments, and they have their diplomatic representatives in each country. So do they have in Pakistan and other developing countries. We should sensitize them. We should keep involving them in dialogues. We should keep finding ways to, you know, bring businesses in our country. Let's start with smaller talks, smaller projects from them. And once that sensitization is there, once that talk is there between governments and their representatives in each country, I think a lot can change. One thing which I really like about Indian government is that they're diplomatic. They really work well on diplomatic ties. You know, you go anywhere in the world, you go in any UN institution, you will find an Indian, and that changes your narrative for your country.
Exactly.
And I think this
but
is
then they
one
use it
thing.
to their advantage, and despite
course.
whatever happens in India, the fact remains that if nobody says anything, because of the same factor is the way they're using the diplomacy to make people, you know, shirk away from the reality of what is happening in India. But that is another aspect of it all. Let's come back to the 1.5 degrees Celsius increase, and, you know, you say cannot happen or is not achievable because of the policies that the current world is, you know, following. Then what should we do? I mean, what if it goes beyond, you know, beyond 2 degrees Celsius? What if the world comes to a state where things will no longer be able to be controlled? Then what happens? Will the realization come way too late?
I mean, I fear that will happen, because in developed countries where these climate changes are happening in the form of wildfires, heat waves, and everything because of usage of fossil fuel industries over there, I think they know that it is because of climate change, but they have enough resources to cover that damage. They can help their people. They have institutes to, you know, who respond well during emergency situations. They save their people. They, you know, give them insurances, and everything is covered at their end. So they don't have money problems. So the realization that should be at an alarming scale, it's, I would say, that's not there. That is why they are not moving away as fast as they should be from fossil fuels usage. But the realization in developing countries is because of the lack of resources. We don't have it. We don't have money to, you know, to help people. Look at flooding, you know, it happened last year and people are still looking for roof on their head. They don't have money to eat,
because the pledges that were made were never translated into action.
Of course.
You know, it all boils down to money and how it needs to be used and properly prioritize and utilize at the right place at the right time before it's way too late. You know, we can talk as much as we want about climate change and how it is impacting the world, but until and unless those that matter, those powers that matter, those countries that matter, don't make the necessary changes by translating the pledges into action, till then we can say as much as we want.
I think there's another really important thing to realize at our end is that even if, let's suppose that money matter, it is translated somewhat. So what is our preparation? What is our institutional setup? What is our plan to spend that money? What are the projects or ideas we are thinking? You know, that preparation is also not there because we think that we will never get money.
That preparation to some extent is there as far as the COPs are concerned, as far as the Geneva moot is concerned. We are a bit short of time. Thank you very much, Maryam, to have come here in the studios. It's good to see you after a long time. I hope before you leave for the States, we'll be able to catch you again for another segment as far as climate change is concerned. Thank you so very much to have joined us. That was Maryam Shabbir, ladies and gentlemen, talking to us about climate change, about a report by the IEA as far as the increase in temperatures, climate change and how it's going to affect the world is concerned. Let's come to our last two stories very quickly. The first is about terrorism. Pakistan and 3 terrorists who have been killed in an intelligence-based operation in the general area Tira of Khyber district. As far as the ISPR's report is concerned, during this operation, intense fire exchange took place between troops and terrorists, which also resulted in the killing of terrorist commander Kifayat Tor Adnan, alias Tor Adnan. The terrorist commander had been actively involved in multiple terrorist activities against the law enforcement agencies as well as killing of innocent civilians. Sensitization of the area had been carried out, and of course the ISPR reaffirmed the determination to eliminate the menace of terrorism. It has been doing the needful, but the fact remains that there are terrorist outfits that emanate from the Afghan soil, that emanate from other soils as well, that are deliberately trying to destabilize Pakistan through such terrorist activities. And thank God we have a robust defense system. We have our armed forces that clear our different areas of such menaces as and when they happen. Let's come to our last story, and that concerns the US government shutdown that is again looming. It has loomed in the past as well. Again it's looming. The White House has begun advising to prepare for a government shutdown, as the Republican lawmakers have shown no signs of progress as far as the negotiations are concerned. They have the money, but it's just that they need to do the needful. The funding deadlock arose after House Republicans refused to support the government spending levels agreed between Biden and Speaker Kevin McCarthy, the top Republican in Congress, that would keep the government gears turning. The United States have experienced 21 gaps in government funding since 1976, leading to varying degrees of disruption. 21 for a country like the US. Under a worst case scenario, the White House now is warily eyeing a repeat of the year 2018, the longest and most recent shutdown, which sidelined roughly 800,000 of the federal government's 2.1 million employees for 34 days. Will that happen again? Only time will tell, but the fact remains that even a country like the US can suffer something that we call government shutdown. The former President Donald Trump had said, unless you get everything, shut it down. A US government shutdown will cause widespread suffering, particularly in the black community. This has also been said by President Biden. The next couple of days will determine where the US government shutdown is going, but I don't think it's anything that devastating is going to happen. They will do the needful before it's way too late. Anyways, we'll be updating you as and when that happens. Till then, ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned to PTV. We will return tomorrow with the new segments, the stories that pertain to us, you and Pakistan. Till then, Allah Hafiz.